Hi, everybody. It's Heidi back with another live stream on the Costumeco channel. And today I have a really awesome guest. This is really exciting. I have Daryl from Siam Costumes. Am I saying it right, by the way? Siam? Like King of Siam?
Yes, Siam is the Western. In Thailand, they say Siam. They put
Siam
a
in
E.
Thailand. Okay.
I'm quite happy with Siam.
I always think of the King and I with that.
Yep, that's it.
But as soon
Well,
as
I'm
I
good.
mentioned the name, my husband said, "Oh, it must be in Bangkok." And of course you are there.
Well, we chose Siam to give it a bit more time scale. Thailand costume sounds a bit sort of a bit modern, but Siam maybe it could have been around centuries as credence.
Exactly. So, okay. So my guest today is Daryl Kent Morris. And Daryl, do you want to tell everyone a little bit about yourself and get so they
Yeah,
can
of
get to
course.
know you?
Um, where does one start? I started this almost by I don't know, accident. I mean, many years ago, in the late 70s, I was living in London. I had a landscape gardening business, and on the weekends, I used to do the old Camden Market, which used to be just great fun. And we used to go around the second-hand shops, and I think you call them in America thrift stores, I think, or something. And then also jumble sales, and just pick up all the bits and pieces. In those days, you could find really, really interesting garments. I mean, the 70s, so you go back 30 years, you're talking 1940s. So I was finding war chests from the Second World War, full of uniforms and demob suits. And the really good things I used to sell to the costume houses, which was Burmans and people like that. And the
Hmm.
not so interesting things I used to put on the market on the weekends. And towards the end of the 70s, I was going over to the Far East, mainly Singapore and Malaysia, and having things made for myself. And I thought, well, if they can do it for me, maybe there's a possibility they could start doing it for things I could actually, make and sell. But it was always up to then still as sort of a part-time sort of occupation. My main business was doing the landscaping, garden landscaping. But gradually over the next 20 years, it sort of became more and more relevant until I suppose the late 90s. It's been full-time occupation now.
That's amazing. And yeah, in Canada, we say thrift stores. So, what do you call them in England?
Well, second-hand shops. I mean, they're
Secondhand
the
shop. I think
charity
we say that
shops.
sometimes too. Vintage
Yeah,
stores.
yeah. It's things, but the jumble sales were the really interesting ones. They're usually events organised by churches, for example. So the local community give what they already have, and to put it slightly macabrely, someone passes away, granddad has passed away, he used all his old clothes, which they say, oh well, who would want this anyway? And you dive in there like a mole into a mound of earth. You come up with these. Used to come up with amazing suits. I used to find 1930s suits, 40s to mob suits. There used to be a thing in the UK called the Burma Style Organisation. There's mostly not many of them, because there's so few left. It's mostly gone now. But you used to find war chests in there. So the war chest would be literally a chest where someone would be stationed in Egypt or Cairo, and the old tailors in Savile Row used to go out there, measure these people up for their uniforms and as well as their civilian wear, and you get this most incredible clothing. That's why I fell in love with it. I love history, and then suddenly finding a garment that had pockets, the old tailcoats that used to have pockets in the tails and things like that, and it was
So you
ribbed
can put a
and just
flask in it.
well, you put anything because you wouldn't have pockets on the outside because you don't
Yeah.
want to lose the silhouette. So it's where you put everything, a flask especially. Yeah, well, you have that in your cane as well, wouldn't you? But I was fascinated that you could find something so completely and differently made to what you were finding in the 70s. In the 70s, there was some, this is the start of the real cheap manufacturing, polyesters and the high waist trousers and the glam rock in the 70s fashion, which was great, but wasn't particularly well made. You get half a dozen wears out of it sometimes. So finding this was interesting and just sparked an interest.
That's so cool. If anyone's joining us now, I'm speaking with Daryl. You're the CEO, right, of Siam
Yeah, it's
Costumes?
a family-run
Siam?
business. The CEO just looks nice on paper, but I'm just
That's
someone else.
Chief Executive Officer.
Yeah,
It's
why not?
changed over the years, right? Like the title.
Yeah, I mean, it's just something to put on a piece of paper. But I
Mhm.
started, originally started. I got my wife. My wife works. My wife works here. My two sons. her cousin, her brother-in-law. It's a very family-run business. It's very, yeah, yeah, it's a
Um,
family-run business.
so you've told me a little bit. So could you tell me a bit about the history of Siam? Or like how long have you been in business, where you're located, etc.?
Well, we're located in Bangkok, downtown Bangkok, which is many people who visit us. We have a lot of designers come here. It's fantastic, for them. They're on the doorstep of I don't know what the equivalent is in Toronto, but it's like being on Oxford Street or Manhattan or something. So it's very central. Um, and I think, I mean, you could say I started this in the early '80s, I suppose, but really went into it full time in the late '90s. For 10 years, because after I used to have landscaping, then I had a nightclub and I had an employment agency.
You're like
And
a Renaissance man. You're a bit of a Renaissance man.
yes, no,
You know
yes,
what's funny? I find a lot of people who are in fashion or costume are. You know what I mean? They sometimes have recreated themselves over and over. So you're not the first person I've talked to who's like that.
well, the thing I learned with this, which was very, I got into the costume side and then I wanted to manufacture. And I thought to myself, what am I going to manufacture? So the main thing I thought of doing was making suits for the barristers and solicitors and lawyers and accountants in the City of London, etc. And I found it very easy to sell a suit to somebody in a profession. And then by accident, we stumbled on I went to a costumier. I know they gave us the opportunity of manufacturing for Saving Private Ryan. I think it was the first big film we did, and also there was another production called Tommy. And
The Who's Tommy?
yeah, the not the film, the obviously the
The stage
production.
production?
Yes,
Yeah, I've seen it. Das Machinoff, that one.
yeah, I think it would have been the early '90s, very early
Yep.
'90s. Is
Oh yeah, I know it.
And it suddenly dawned on me: if you're selling to a professional person, a lawyer, you're looking at a minimum of 2 visits. One to visit them to actually measure them up, and then another one to take the finished garment, and a good chance a third visit to do fittings, etc. And it's a lot of traveling backwards and forwards. And we did Save a Private Ryan and these, and suddenly I was doing a lot more. I was able to do a lot more with 1 or 2 visits. And then it sort of revamped the idea of what I used to do in the '70s, with selling to the costumiers. So they sort of one went into each other, and I started to stop doing the professional side and concentrate on the films and TV and opera and theatre. But the thing I didn't realise at the time, and it takes far longer to get a costume person to trust you, because it's not the money, it's their reputation is the most important thing. And it's many years, of building up the reputation, trial, and sorry to say trial and error. My biggest regret, I never did costume as a course, when I was younger. I wish I had now, because I would have mostly made so many mistakes. And you're bound to make them because you just don't realise until you start doing something how things work. And it took a few years, but that was 30 odd years ago now.
I have to say, as someone who studied theater costume, I have to say, I didn't really learn much at all in school. Everything I learned was, so I think you probably were fine. Honestly, I learned like the hard way, like you did.
Definitely was how you learned, isn't it? I mean,
Yeah, there was a
like
play I did where I had to sew buttons on the pants, like all like along the edge. They were like military pants, and I had to put buttons on. And the actor went out on stage. Luckily, it was just a rehearsal, and the buttons started like falling off, like ping. And I was just like horrified, right? So yeah. So I'm sure you might have picked up a few things, but I'm sure you've most of what you've learned is hands
well,
on.
you continue one thing. You continuously. You're only ever scratching the surface of the possible, or what there is to know. This is why I love this industry so much, because you're just always learning.
Absolutely. Now, so your company's about what, 30 years old?
Yeah, we had previous incarnations of it, but yeah, I've been doing this now for 30 years, and then prior to that, in the '70s, obviously doing the selling to the costume houses.
So how has the business changed over the years? Like especially with COVID now, it must have changed quite a bit.
Well, COVID is another thing altogether. That was a big game changer in the positive, more positive than negative, I think,
Oh,
definitely
that's
for
good to
us.
hear. Okay.
But to your first question, I would say I used to spend, I mean, 30 years ago, I was spending $1,500 a month just on telephone bills, faxes. The communication was, the internet was in its infancy, emails weren't really used, and and a lot of traveling. Going, if you wanted to see somebody, you had to go and see them. You couldn't. That was the only way you could do it. And faxes, everything was sent by faxes, etc., etc. So the communication is the biggest deal, and people's attitudes has changed. 30 years ago, people would, designers, costumes wouldn't really feel comfortable about putting work out. If it's the UK 5,000 miles away, if it's LA 6,000, 7,000 miles away, it was a big leap of faith. And I think with the way the world's changed, the fact is that we're having this conversation now, or I could walk around with a GoPro on my head and show them the factory, the workshop. Um, I could have somebody trying on a toile or trying on a garment now. It's a lot easier. People are far more accepting that distance isn't necessarily a criteria. It still comes down to the leap of faith. It's very important. It's speed of delivery, it's quality. And one of the advantages with us obviously being here is that we can produce at a cheaper price. And I say that hesitantly because it's not as cheap as people think. The cost of living in Bangkok is most probably higher than a lot of East European countries. Our rent is a lot. We spend a lot on rent. Our wages, we have a Malaysian pattern cutter. We've got an Indonesian pattern cutter. We bring people from all over the world, and we've brought people from a guy called Michael Sloan, who was the pattern cutter for San Francisco, LA, New York Opera.
Oh, you've lured
Well,
people away.
we brought him over for 6 months to train our staff, which is mostly one of the best investments we ever did. So
Uh,
it's
oh, sorry, go ahead.
gone. No,
No, I
so
just wanted to say hello to a few people in the chat.
hello.
I just wanted to say hi to Natural Selection and Forgotten Drifter. Those are both great names, by the way. Sorry, go ahead. Go ahead, Daryl. What
That's
you were
right. No
saying.
problem. Right, Heidi. So the advantages is the flexibility here. What the main reason for choosing Bangkok is because of the indigenous number of tailors here, because of the tourist trade for 30, 40 years, which is an overhang from the R&R days of the Vietnam War. So it used to be quite easy to get hold of tailors and seamstresses of a good quality, and then bring them in the house and spend 2 years training them up so they actually perfect the trade of what's required, which is different from the tourist trade. John Smith from Birmingham coming here to have his 24-hour suit made is completely different from Kate Hawley asking us to make something for a 19th century production. But that and the materials are here. So much of what people buy nowadays is from this region.
Yeah, I saw that on your website. That's one of the advantages you have, is that you have access to all these fabrics and materials, right? That they're all in that region. Whereas in America or the UK, they would probably be imported from that region anyway. And probably you have to pay more for it too, right? Because of import fees and all that kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, Thailand's like we do get some UK American fabrics. A lot of the fabrics we have to use of that nature we import specifically for whichever production we're working on. But you still have some great wool mixes that have good patterns, good plaids, etc., or stripes, etc., which will work. Linen, silk. We have a lot of things made in Hong Kong, and Hong Kong, China, buttons and buckles, etc. We have fabrics made when we need to up in the north. I call them the sword and sandal fabrics. We have manufacturers and agents up there. So we do a lot of that sort of things like Troy, Alexander, which was one of our biggest productions, Kingdom of Heaven. I mean, the list is.
So you'll have your fabrics milled and made from scratch.
If need be, yes. I mean, if need be, on a request, but and dyed as well. I mean, we can get things dyed quite quickly. But part of the fun is actually going up to these places and discovering things that you'd never expect to see. And that's the real, that's where the fun is. You know, the mundane part is having it bespokely made, I suppose. But
I guess you have to
it's
be a
still
bit of an explorer. You have to be a bit of an explorer. One like you were saying with the old sales that you would go in there
yeah,
and you'd be digging through trunks,
exactly the same
right?
thing. It's what you find. It's the unexpected is the fun part always. And you know, we hold a huge amount of stock, buttons and stock, buckles and trimmings. And
Yeah, you know what I was thinking? Like, you guys haven't posted any of that stuff on your Instagram page. That would be so fascinating to see, like,
I
posted. Like,
think
uh,
Alex, we got an Instagram page that's for fabrics as well, haven't we?
oh, do you? Okay, I will find it. I will find
And
your fabric.
we were meant we were we've commissioned a video to be made of the factories. We've put videos, pictures up before and videos, but we're trying to do a video of the Chiang Mai factories that make our fabric. But because of COVID, the villages, because it's all hand loomed, you know, it's on a 34, 40-inch loom, so it's really authentic. But they closed the villages off, the hill tribe villages off last year because of COVID, and though they're back open again, we're trying to get the guys to go back, a team to go back up to take a video of it, because it is absolutely fascinating. It is so removed from some mill in Bradford or Milan or something. It's quite quaint, but I mean it's very beautiful. But it's also, you know, these beautiful fabrics they produce, and you see them, you buy them, and then you don't see them again. So this is why my wife says I'm a kleptomaniac. I've got more fabrics than money.
Yeah, it's kind of like you have a baby and then you have to let it go. But you have
Oh yeah.
multiple babies, right? You have all these babies you have to let go over and over again. It can be traumatic.
Oh, I don't like talking about it.
I have a new person join. Hi, Cindy, saying hello in the chat. So we're with Daryl from Siam Costumes, and we're having a great conversation about Siam Costumes in Bangkok, Thailand. So the next question I was going to ask, I sort of just touched on it. So we had this thing called COVID. We were just talking about it. So you were saying it helped you for the better, but can you explain that a little bit?
All right. So I think one of the plus factors of being born in the 60s, I grew up in the 70s and 80s, and recessions and inflation were very common. You know, it just happened in the UK every few years. And AK Watch, hello Daryl, nice to meet you, and you, AK Watch, thank you. I grew up with recession and inflation, so I was primed for it. And I think the younger generation, when I say younger generation, people under the age of 35, 40, you know, they don't know the inflation that we used to have in that period of time, the awful recessions we used to have. So when COVID hit the world in the beginning of 2020, and then in March, I could see that it was going to affect not Thailand at the time, but certainly all our customers, things were going to close down. We closed the business down for 5 months. I primed it, and I knew that it could be. I didn't know how long it was going to be. You know, initially I thought it might be a month, and it dragged on to 5 months. But we rent a lot of properties, and I spoke to the landlords and got them to reduce the rent by half of that period. We put our staff on leave and gave them wages for that period of time, was reduced, and we cut our own costs down right down to the minimum, which enabled us to survive the period. So, become August 2020. We opened up again, and the start was very, very sporadic. One of the first productions we started on again was Elvis, the one that's just been released. That was closed down for that period of time, and I think that started in September or October. And there was a backlog of work which we did for that. And for the first 8 months until April 21, it was very much up and down. You know, 1 minute we were busy, the next minute we were quiet, and we were saying to people, look, take a couple of weeks off. And then in April 21, we just hit a massive, it just suddenly, like the world, you know, the costume world exploded. It just suddenly became really far busier than we ever expected. And that was primarily because of the internet, because Netflix, Amazon, Apple, all those sort of companies suddenly started wanting to make content, which before they didn't have. There wasn't enough content around.
Yeah, people were binging. There was nothing to do.
And big players started going in. Apple, you know, who spent a fortune on, I mean, unbelievable sums of money on production. I mean, our biggest production that year was Emancipation.
Yeah, Emancipation.
Emancipation, Will Smith, and the design of Francine Chuck. And it's a huge production, and it's just a one-off, one-off program, and spending money that a normal feature film program, 200 million plus, I should think, etc., and a large part on the budget. So we were just working, and have almost for the last since April then been working continuously. Very, very long hours.
That is something that's changed. Speaking of like television is on par, like budget wise, with like movies now.
Yeah,
Like
it's not the school.
We'll speak about Lord of the Rings shortly, but that is the most expensive, I think, television production ever made in history, from my understanding.
Yes. And that's mostly not including the money they paid to the family to actually have the rights to do it as well. I mean, that was in the region, if the rumors is correct, around $1 billion or something. I don't know, but the production is very, very expensive.
Yeah. So now we're going to just, if you're okay with this, we're going to get into talking a little bit more the nitty gritty of your business. I want to welcome everyone who's here. Alicia is here. AK is Alicia. Hi, Alicia. And we've got Reflective Rambling as well. So people are coming in, they're commenting, and we're with Daryl, and we're having a great chat about his company, Siam Costumes. So my next question is, so let's talk a bit about your team. How many shows, how big is your team to start with?
We have 40 full-time staff, and we can call upon another similar sort of number. But I mean, so if on a normal, at the moment we're working on, I think, about 7 productions, 2 which are finishing this weekend, which is the Greece one, which we mentioned earlier on before we went live. We're just doing the final bits and pieces on that. That would go off this weekend. And the other one, what's the other one we're just finishing this week? Is it Chiefs of War?
Yeah, Chief of War, just another Apple one.
Another Apple production, Chiefs of War, which we've done a load of shirts for. But on top of that, we have another load of productions in line, which is Norwegian Cruise Line, which we're doing a big production, stage production for.
Oh, that's fun. And the cruise ships are back, I hear.
Yeah,
they're back.
And they all these big cruise lines have all sort of commissioned these vast shows, boats, which they have to still keep to. And so each like NCL have got at least one a year coming on, massive monstrosities. So that's very busy. But we're doing small things like a show for Dallas Theatre, Clue. We're doing San Francisco Opera, Houston Grand Opera, and production-wise, what else we got coming up on film, TV?
What the festival?
Yeah.
Bonfire.
Bonfire. We're doing, which I'm not too sure the actual.
Oh, a Bond pilot.
Bonfire. No, Bonfire. It's a 1923.
Bonfire.
Yeah, it's set in an orphanage for Russian children or something.
Yeah. But by the way, Daryl's not talking to a devil on his shoulder. you have somebody behind you who's helping.
Yes. That's my son, Alex.
Alicia's has a fun comment here. She says, love these costume discussions. It's Heidi's fault I pay more attention than I did before to costumes in movies and TV shows now. I love you for all the knowledge you spread around the realm. Oh, that's so sweet. This is my main goal, is to get people looking at costumes more, Daryl.
I think nothing reflects humanity or the history of humanity more than clothing.
Mm-hmm.
Every aspect of it is how it's made, why it was made, what was used to make it, the peculiarities, what was happening at that particular time in that country. It is if you love history and you love fashion, costume reflects that more than anything else, I think. That's my
okay, so you were sort of saying like you're working about 7 productions. So how many productions do you typically work on at a time? About 7 or so?
Always, usually about 5. I mean, we're just finishing 2, and we've got quite a few starting. The film and TV is a little bit quiet. It tends to go quiet in July, August, and then starts trickling in again towards the end of August. You start people going into pre-production. It can be seasonal. Sometimes it's not.
Yeah, but where do you put all your staff, by the way? You must have a massive. I saw pictures online. You must have a massive space.
What we do, majority of our staff, we try to keep them local. I mean, Bangkok, anyone that's ever been here, you said your husband's been here.
Yes.
It has, it's purgatory with the traffic. It's absolutely awful. And the last thing you want is people living too far away, because the traffic's bad. It makes them tired before they come. So what we do is we rent accommodation locally for them. And what we say, we have with various landlords, we say to them, if you want to rent there, we pay your rent. And it's within 5 minutes stone throw, which is really, really good, because we have to work long hours. This morning we started at 6 and we'll finish at 9 tonight with a couple of hours break in between. And you want to try to avoid people traveling too much. Some do, but it's entirely up to them. But most want to live and work in the same vicinity. It makes their life easier. And it's a strange thing. In Thailand, you don't employ people. You adopt people. Your staff aren't. You don't employ them; they become your family, and you have great loyalty, but you have huge responsibility as well. It's a very tight. People don't. They want that communal spirit here. It's quite different from the West, I think. That's one thing I noticed here when I first come here. They really want to be part of a team, a family, and it's very, very important. So, yeah, it's a very nice aspect, but can be slightly challenging if you're Western to adapt to that sort of way of life. But it's very, very productive, I think.
So you work long days. Like, do you guys, are you open 7 days a week? Do you have to be open 7 days a week?
No, we try not to, unless there's something we have to get out. We tail end of last year, we had to a couple of times. We were doing Christmas Carol adaptation. What was it called? Spirited, which suddenly became very tight on time, because some production, the problem with anyone in film and TV, whether it's costume or whether it's lighting or whatever, would tell you the same thing. The time available is becoming less and less, so pre-production's less, and then schedules change. When COVID changed, there's cast changes. So you have to be flexible, and sometimes you have to work these long hours 7 days a week. I really, really try to avoid it, because you don't get the best out of people. But the staff like the overtime, and they're quite more happy with it than I am. But yeah.
Well, you can do it for a stretch, I think, especially if you're younger, right? You can do it. Like, I know when I was younger, I could pull all-nighters, and I could, I'd be up all night sewing.
I'm in my 60s, Heidi.
Yeah. So no, because it's funny, because there's a couple of costume designers, I've been reading interviews about them, and one thing about costume design that's kind of cool is you could pretty much work into your 70s, 80s, if you want, and some of them are, but then they have to work these 16-hour days, and I don't know how they do it.
Delegate. That's the way you do it.
Yes, exactly.
And cat nap. I think
little naps throughout the day.
That helps as you get past your 50s.
So, like a logistics question I have for you is, what's the approximate turnaround time to get a costume made for your company?
Okay, yeah, because that was one of your questions. All right, so let's just look at a very straightforward scenario. I mean, the thing that we do most is a suit.
And you do those
and
very well.
It does happen where we've done quite a lot of these sort of shows with Dance with the Stars. So they don't know who the contestants are, and then suddenly on a Monday they have to say, right, we have to make something very quickly, get it shipped, and get it ready for the next weekend. So you use a Henry Ford method. Instead of one person doing one thing, various individuals will do different parts. So you have one person who will do the sleeves, another person will do the body, two people do the finishing off, somebody will do the trousers. And so you could say, as long as it's not too complex, you could do a pattern for a suit in about 6 hours, to cut the fabric in 3 hours, and to manufacture combined number of hours, and maybe 3 or 4 people, 15 hours of manufacturing. Now, pre-COVID, I could send something on a Friday here, and it'll be delivered on Monday in LA. Because you send on a Friday, wow. Because we're 15 hours behind, obviously that works to our advantage. It did change with COVID. I mean, the couriers became quite difficult. When I was younger, I used to have the saying, come the revolution, the couriers will be building the wall, not just being put up against it. They were giving so many. They've always been a problem, but with COVID, it became even worse. It's gone back to some normality. We can still get things into LA 2-3 working days, but it's less defined. It's less. I could guarantee it almost 90%, but now I'm not too sure. It's not so much, but generally I say 3 to 4 days we can get into a country.
That's pretty
Europe.
crazy.
Yeah,
Sorry, guys. I think I'm having a bit of a delay on my end here. So if I'm glitching, I don't know what's happening. It must be my bandwidth or something. Sorry, Daryl. Okay. So, here's a question for you. Okay. How does the process work when many of your clients, you sort of explained this a little bit, are in the US or the UK? I think you've sort of explained a bit of that already.
Yeah, I mean, it's the first time someone uses. I did send you an FAQ sheet, which we use. I don't know if you had a chance to read it, but
Yes.
It's always the same questions. What's the process? So the first process is that we say to a designer or a costume department, what do you want and when do you need it for? So, okay. So supposing they say, well, we want a dozen suits, a dozen tailcoat suits. So the first process is actually deciding what fabric they want to use. 95%, 90% of the time, they use our fabric. It makes it far, far less expensive because they don't have to buy the fabric, they don't have to send it to us, don't have to pay the courier fees, they don't have to pay the import tax. It's already here. And we have we have 2 buildings full of fabric and buttons. I mean, a colossal amount. I mean, we do retail as well. We do actually sell fabrics and buttons. It's on the other side of the business. Once we've chosen the fabrics and we know the designs, the next stage obviously is, are we making to measure or are we doing stock sizes? And stock sizes will change slightly between the UK and America or Europe and America, but we ascertain if it's made to measure. They download a made to measure chart preferably from our website, but if they're professional, it doesn't make much difference. I think that the most important criteria is if it's made to measure. The thing I always ask, were these given to you by the agent or did you actually do them yourselves?
Yes, very important difference.
Thespians being thespians, if they're supplied by the actor, everyone is 6 foot plus and everyone's got a 40-inch chest and a 32-inch waist, etc. But in reality, it's not. To take good measurements is a very, very it's a very important skill, and it's not easily done, especially the more rotund people and especially the female of the species. Women are far more difficult than men to take a good measurements, but if they're done professionally, we're going to get it 95-99% right, and it should only be tweaking. The way we make the costumes means they're easily alterable. Open back seams, flat lining, if we're allowed to. So.
Yeah, you said you leave a generous,
always have to, yeah. There's hand.
That's actually a theater thing. That's a theater thing that
Exactly.
I learned in theater. Is generous seam allowance, and you don't do the hems. You said as well, right?
Yeah, trousers are always unhemmed. Mm-hmm. I mean, if you're doing a bodice, you do open seam allowance, flat lining on the inside, and as I said, as long as you have good measurements, the tweaking is very, very simple. It's very straightforward. It's not long involved. If you have bad measurements, it's always going to be the shoulders and sleeves on a jacket, for example, which are the real hideous things to try and alter because you have to take the sleeve off because you never want to change the sleeve length from the bottom. You want to take it up and bring it up, otherwise you have marks, etc. And button placement's going to be wrong.
Forgotten Drifter has a good question. Forgotten Drifter, I'll get to that question later on. I just want to say hi to Justin. So we'll get to that question because we're kind of moving into that area soon. Okay. So we sort of talked a bit. You've been kind of touching on some of these things, but what's it like to work with a costume designer? How's that process? I don't know if you've kind of talked a bit about this.
Yeah, okay.
Is it like do they email you and then you respond?
Oh yeah, sorry. Yeah, they
yeah.
These conversations. It always depends on whether if it's first time people, they generally email you either via the website or via. Alex, for example, sends multitude of emails out to people all the time, keeping them informed what we're doing, etc., etc. This is a very, very incestuous world we live in. I mean, everyone knows what the other people are doing, and who they use, etc., etc. So a lot of it's word of mouth, but an email will come through. I try to actually, I like to call people because you can then gauge what they're actually looking for, what they're trying to achieve. And it's the usual questions I've said: timescales, budgets. Budgets are very, very important. Um,
You ask them what
use,
their budget is?
yeah, sometimes it's easier to work backwards because if the
Sure.
people have a large production, they're saying, "I want this, this, and this," and then you say, "Well, okay, there's dresses and skirts and jackets and blazers, and there's a whole list of things." Sometimes it's easy to say, "Well, okay, what's your budget?" And rather than me try to price this individually, and then if you tell me what money you have or willing to spend, I can tell you what we can do for that, rather than trying to sort of break things down to individually. It can work both ways. It's what the costume department wants. But what we're trying to do is make the costume department's life as simple as possible.
Well, and also
People,
sometimes like you could spend a long time on a quote and then just to find out that they don't really have any money.
it can take,
You know.
quotes can take days and days. People use people. If you can make a costume department's life simple, you can. I mean, my catchphrase is exceed their expectations. They use us for the first time. They've got this. Everyone's got a viewpoint. Everyone thinks, well, it's going to be like this and like that. But if you can actually exceed what they're expecting to receive, a better price or better quality or quicker, they'll come back to you. It's a self-perpetuating industry. This, everyone wants their life to be easy.
Well, Angelina, who is the costume designer on the stand, and she's doing this new, the prequel to the Grease show. She was saying to me, like, she wouldn't have been able to do a show like that without someone like you, without your company. That's what she told me in an interview. Yeah. It would be impossible, like cost wise and labor wise, right? Like she wouldn't have been able to do it. So you're fulfilling an important service.
I mean, we can produce extremely quickly, which can almost be a hindrance sometimes because people say, all right, we haven't got much time, let's use Siam Costumes.
Yeah, because you want people to come to you because of the quality. Like you don't want just people to come in to you because you're fast and cheap, right? You want people to come to you because you produce a good product.
Yes. But initially it's mostly not the best of reasons, but once they start using it, they know what we can produce. And we're the only people in this region outside. There's a couple of companies in Hong Kong, but they are more casino, theme park type entertainment productions. But we're the only people in this part of the world that do what we do. I mean, that's mostly the nearest would be Australia or America, most of it, or Europe. So it's a very we're blessed to being the only people doing this in this particular region.
Okay, this is a fun question. Now I know this because I've been trolling your Instagram. But can you tell us some of the shows and movies that your company has worked on? I know you do a lot of theater. You do cruise ships. You do, opera, big productions like Dancing with the Stars. But are there some shows and movies that our audience might know?
Yeah, I mean, the resurrection of Roots for Ruth Carter about 5-6 years ago. That was an amazing show. And Ruth is one of those wonderful designers that actually who trusts you and say, right, this is what I want. Show me what you can do, and also give me the fabric.
Of that.
Yeah. And that's beautiful. That's a real blessing that a designer that trusts you. We've just finished doing Shogun resurrection of that 1970s show, 80s show with Richard Chamberlain.
I was a really big fan of both the original Roots, which was, I don't know about you, but when I was a kid, we had a family room and my parents would sit around, they'd be watching Shogun, Taipan, Roots, Alex Haley, like all the big miniseries, right? That was a big thing in the 80s and in the 70s, I think, or 80s.
And it's nice to work on those reincarnations of your childhood. That was quite interesting. The Emancipation with Will Smith one was a massive project. That was very, very interesting. And again, Francine, the designer, gave us a lot of scope and was very brilliant. Really good with us. That was a wonderful thing. And that's one of ours.
And I've had the very great pleasure of interviewing Ruth Carter. That was probably one of the highlights of my YouTube career. They gave me 10 minutes only. I only got 10 minutes to interview her. So that must have been a pleasure to work with her. She said very nice things about your company, by the way, on your website.
Ruth, you ever see it? Thank you. Oh yeah, she did. Yes, yeah. She's
Mm-hmm.
and she's a interesting, very interesting designer. I love designers that can create from nothing and have the ability to conjure something up. And one of my favorite designers is Tim Chappell, who did the original Priscilla with Lizzie Gardner, and they created something from absolutely nothing. From $10,000, I think they were their budget. They did something amazing, and I love creativity. I mean, where it's not restricted by money, but it comes from what the resources that are available at the time. That is really fascinating. That I love. That I really enjoy.
Sorry, where am I here? Okay. What's the most challenging aspect about running a costume business? I'm sure there's lots of things, but can you think of a few?
Well, there's plenty, but I think it's getting the equation right, of having too many staff and not enough work, or too much work and not enough staff. Is always difficult because it takes such a long time to train people up. And then if you do go for a long period, like COVID, for example, the cost of keeping these people going with rents and everything else is astronomical. I'm not going to give you obviously numbers, but I mean, I think when I've mentioned to people, I know how much it costs to run a business like this per month. They're quite astounded how much it actually costs, because the perception is that you're in Thailand, it's quite cheap, but in reality, it's not. Not when you have 40 odd people working for you, and lots of buildings, etc. And overheads are phenomenal. I think that's the most challenging. Initially, if you asked me this 20, 30 years ago, I was saying it's actually getting people to trust you. But as I said earlier on, we did. It's so incestuous. We did, many years ago, 8 years ago, we did the first series or second series of Man in the High Castle, and because we did Man in the High Castle, the costume department went on and did. The supervisor, Caroline Griffin, went on and did Peter Pan, which we worked on. And then she's just done Shogun, which we worked on. One of the designers went and did Perry Mason, which we worked on. So the reputation you build is, as I say to my son, money is important, but your reputation is far, far more important.
We often say that it's like building relationships.
Totally.
You have that trust. So you're building, you work with a designer and they have a good experience with you, and then they want to work with you again because it's a good experience.
And it's the assistant and the supervisor, and it could be the buyers. There's such large departments sometimes. The people are fragmented all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
And as I said to you earlier on, people want to make their lives easier. If they know they can use us and they know the challenge of however many miles away isn't going to be an obstruction. And I'm a phone call away. I do answer the phone at 3 o'clock in the morning. And, we get into work very early, or we finish late. The communication is the big thing for people to understand. Isn't really a problem.
Okay, so what's the best part of your business? Like, is it the travel? Is it like getting to see your work on film? Like, what is it?
It's never boring in the travel, but to be honest with you, if I say the best part is actually, I think one of the most beautiful things is seeing a piece of fabric that has nothing there on a cutting table with chalk marks on. There's something so timeless about it. And that's what I think is actually really, really beautiful, is actually seeing something that is nondescript and has no particular form or anything. And then, days later or whenever, seeing a suit made that fits beautifully on screen, that is really, really, creating in a process that is still timeless. Even though we use electric machines now or electric irons, the process of what we do is timeless. It's the same as it was 200 years ago. It still goes from an idea to a pattern, to a fabric, to a chalk, to a cutter, to a seamstress or a tailor, to a finisher off. The whole process is exactly the same. That I love. And it sounds a bit naff, I don't know. I love employing people. I love people who actually take pleasure in what they do. And I love the family relationship. Having my own family here is something really remarkable. To be, 61 years old, to live and work with your family, your sons and your wife and their family, it's really gratifying. That's most probably very, very important. And the people that work for you, the relationship you build with them over the years.
I failed to mention this, that you are a family business. How many members of your family work in the business?
One myself, my wife, 2 sons, a brother-in-law, and a cousin, so 6, and a dog.
Oh, and a dog. Now, is the dog
Fastest
always in the? Is the dog usually in the shop
He tries
or in
to.
the
He's a bit
office?
old. He's a 13-year-old golden retriever who's seen slightly better days. So
Aw.
sleep at the moment, but he used to be far more involved than he used to. But he's still
Uh,
here.
you didn't mention this, but is your home like above the shop? Like, are you
No,
close to
no.
work? Oh, so you do have to commute.
Yeah, I'm quite. You don't want to, it'd be too much. I mean, 18 hours a day and go upstairs.
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah.
You have way.
So somebody can open
And
up the
time,
shop if you're not there on time.
the two boys, our 2 sons open up. We open up. I mean, we opened up this morning, but my son turned up afterwards. It depends on how busy we are. You know, this morning we opened up at 6. Normally we might open up about 7:30. We want our staff to come in. They have their breakfast, and then they start work. So it's horses for courses. It depends on what we're doing and what we have. You know, how urgent things are. Excuse me.
So this is a great question. Why would a costume department want to use Siam Costumes, and what are the advantages, and how do the benefits outweigh the risks of working with you? We talked a little bit about it, but maybe a more full
Yeah.
answer.
I mean, I mean, it's going to be slightly repeated, but I mean, first and foremost, there's very few costume houses that are of our size. I mean, 40 in-house staff is quite large by any costume department size, that specifically does costume. So our turnaround time can be incredibly quick. We don't like doing it quickly because it's not the way we obviously want to work. But if we have to, we can produce 30, 40 suits in a week. And very, very few people can do that by using, the long hours, outside staff, etc., etc. So speed of delivery is obviously very important. The advantages of not being in New York or London means that even though our rents are quite expensive compared to certain parts of the world, it certainly doesn't compare to New York or London. But it's quality. I said to you earlier on, we brought people over from the West. We brought people from Australia Opera. We brought people from New York, LA, to train our staff specifically in theatrical and film tailoring and seamstressing. I would say this, wouldn't I? But I believe our quality is on a par with pretty well anywhere you're going to get in LA or New York. I mean, we might not be right at that sort of where they spend 2 weeks doing fittings. We don't have the time and people don't use us for that.
Mm-hmm.
But if somebody wants a high quality suit that can be front of camera with main cast or background, we're an ideal choice. We can produce quickly. We have phenomenal amount of fabrics and call upon buttons, etc., and all the full range of the complementary itinerary items that people need to manufacture a suit. And if you're lucky enough and your costume department allows you, you get a holiday, well, a busman's holiday, you call it, a week in Bangkok, going through the markets and overseeing the initial makes of your costumes. And a lot of designers do that. There's a lot of positives here. China's a great place.
And you're good for bulk too. Like, for instance, I know you did sex education, which, by the way, I love that. And Justin's in here. He's my editor. We did a really great video. I think it was a good video on the costumes of season 3. So I know you made all the uniforms.
Yes, that was
which I have a picture. Yeah. Let me find the picture here. I have to go under brand though. Okay. And I was like, these were like, okay, so this is Maeve here. She's like one of the stars. If anybody hasn't seen the show, by the way, it's fantastic. It's a UK show.
Pretty
so good. It's, so there's everyone. So how many did you make of this? You must have made a lot.
Did it run to a couple of hundred? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it ran to a couple of hundred. And it was very interesting because the designer,
and I've got your stills as well. These are all from Instagram, everyone. So if you want to look at all of, there's the
designer
jackets.
was working to what the actual director wanted. The director went to a public school, I think a private school. I think you call it in the States or Canada, but in the UK you can call it private or public. So he went to one of these schools where school uniforms were worn like
Like
this.
a
So he had
prep school. I think that's a prep school.
it's a private school. I don't know. It costs a lot of money to go to anyway.
Yeah, we have them
But
in Canada. Yeah, for sure.
so he had a very specific idea what he was looking for. So we had to find this very uncomfortable, heavy, fleecy wool and then bind it with another fabric. And yeah, it was good fun. And again, it was a very, very quick turnaround, very specific to what we required. And it was a great, yeah, it was one of those series that I watched, which I thought
It's so good. I love it. So you did end up watching it?
yeah, well, yeah, occasionally I did.
Yeah, and the uniforms are a huge plot point in season 3 as well, right? Like it's a huge
don't
it's a
think it
huge
was
part
in
of the story.
Yes.
Oh,
Exactly.
there's one picture I missed here, which is so funny. I see if I can find it. This one here. She was such a great character. I loved her.
Oh, the script is wonderful. It's
Yeah,
one of the
it's really.
cleverest for a long time.
So if
And
anybody
it's-
hasn't seen
it's
Sex
education
Education,
as well.
please watch it.
Yeah, it's very good.
Okay. Okay. What's your personal favorite aspect of your job? Like, what do you love most about? I mean, you mentioned the fabric and seeing it being on the table and everything, but is there a role that you have that you really, really love and enjoy? Working with people, I think,
I
was
think
one
it's just
thing.
the finished product. I think working with really, truly creative people who give you some sort of rope, allow you the freedom to, help and be involved in it is really satisfying. And the travels, obviously, we haven't traveled for 2 years, but we're starting to do that. But I'm 61 years old, and I think the thing I hope more than is leaving something behind. When I retire or finish, the sons will take over or taking over now more so. And it's actually it's a great business. It's interesting. It's very hard work sometimes, but it's doing something that outlives you. In 100 years' time, the costumes will still be seen on TV or cinema or a contact lens or whatever the technology is in 100 times. You're leaving a small legacy. That's something quite, and being involved in something way after you're gone, which I think that's quite interesting part of it.
And the other thing that I really love, and this is something that I've encountered as someone who covers costumes on this channel, is that first of all, a lot of them get auctioned off and then are in people's personal collections. So people have a lot of times these items in their collections. But also what I'm noticing more recently is a lot of times productions will hold on to them and then they'll circulate them as an exhibit. So people can go see the costumes that they love so much in person, which I think is really cool.
One of our biggest advertising, or I don't know, subliminal advertising, is a lot of costume. Okay, so you're correct. Some get auctioned off, some get go on exhibition like Ruth's pieces do, and a lot will be put against losses and damages from the rental houses. So, for example, we did 2 big slavery productions, which was Roots and
The Underground Railroad. I've got pictures of those. Yeah, here, let me show those.
And
I've got them. They're labeled, I think.
Part of the reason why Francine used us in Emancipation was because so many of our costumes she was coming across in the big West, like Western costumes were coming across in the rental places.
Mm-hmm.
So, these, for example, all this fabric was bespokely made. The buttons, you can't see it because it's not a close-up, but
So
the buttons
gorgeous.
were made specifically for them. And Caroline, she's again a fantastic, really wonderful designer, a beautiful person to work for. Really, very engaging, very fun, very sympathetic, very interested. Just, again, one of those people that I feel very, very lucky to have worked with. And we're just starting or finishing halfway through a project with her at the moment, Chiefs of War.
It's really, by the way, I have to say, I love how these have been styled. Like they have the top button done up, and then as they walk, the coat's kind of open.
Yes,
that's pretty cool, huh?
It's the sack suit thing. I mean, this is specifically what she wanted. How the top button is, and then it fades away towards the bottom of the jacket.
I don't think I've ever seen that before, though. I love these dresses so much. Are they linen? Do you know?
Yeah, I think they were
Yeah,
cotton
yeah.
cotton linen mix, wasn't it?
Okay.
Otherwise it would crease. Yeah, cotton linen because they would have. So we bought, I don't know, 4 or 5, I don't know, 1,000 yards of the fabric. There was 4 different colours, and then we had them dyed to her particular palette coat. I say
Which
it's
is
cotton.
just gorgeous.
They had to have the cotton to stop it creasing too much. People
Hmm.
love the idea of linen, but in reality, it's a pain in the ass to work with because it just always having to get creases out of it. Put a
I
cotton
love,
in there.
actually, I have to say, I love, like, maybe this is an 80s thing for me, like, I'm an 80s girl, but I love when someone's wearing a linen suit or linen pants and they are slightly creased. I kind of like that. Like, I don't know. Like, I love the fact that it's kind of relaxed and not, like, perfectly pressed. Is that crazy?
No, not at all.
Would that drive you bonkers?
As a fashion item is great, but the trouble is if you're doing film and continuity, and then
Yes.
you're
Yes, I
going
know what you're
back,
saying
and
there. Yeah.
it, look, this is something that you or people in costume would notice, and people always do costumes for their peers as well as the film themselves. They're always, especially if you're doing military, you find that you're going into the realms that the costumes is not normally the costume advisor, military advisor, is doing it to better his peers. This is what I did, and that's a very, very completely different way of
Minty
looking
thinks, hi, Minty. Thank you. He thinks you're a wonderful guest. That's really great. Sorry, Minty's a
at
girl.
it.
Sorry, Minty.
Thank you.
I think Natural Selection, I don't know if you're talking about the Underground Railroad. Yeah, it's a bit hard to watch, but it's a great show.
Yeah, and it shouldn't be easy to watch. History
Yeah.
of that nature should never be easy. Yeah, it's a. I think the worst part of it is still with us today. The way people behave, unfortunately, is still reminiscent of that period. But anyway, I mean, hopefully films like Roots and Underground Railroad and
Hmm.
Emancipation when
And
it
you were
comes
doing
out.
also, we were talking about, my husband and I were talking about this earlier. You did The Porter as well, which was, I think it's a CBC show.
Which one, sorry?
The Porter?
Oh, The Porter. Yeah, yeah, that's
Yes.
when we finished tail end of last year. And has that come out now? Have you seen it? Have you?
It's out in Canada. I haven't seen it yet, but it is out, and I actually want to see it. I think I was hoping it would come to Netflix. A lot of CBC shows end up on Netflix after because if you watch it, you get all these commercials. Like the
Right.
CBC are horrific for commercials. I'm spoiled now
I
with
haven't.
Netflix and Amazon, right?
I mean, yeah, I mean that's the beauty of Netflix. But there's certain things. There's a lot of shows that we don't see. I mean, which are out there. But the
Yeah,
Porter
it
was,
must be hard. Like if you're like, oh, we worked on the show and I didn't get to see it, that would be hard.
especially in theatre and opera. I mean,
Hmm.
you very, very rarely. I suppose that's slightly sad. We don't see a lot of theatre productions we do.
Well, I've got it here. We'll try to get through a few more questions. Actually, let me ask this question. There was a really good one here from Forgotten Drifter, and I actually love this question. Oh, sorry. I would be interested to know if there was a film or show that you didn't work on but you wish you had. So that's a great question. Game of Thrones? Did you get to do anything for Game of Thrones?
No, I mean, we supplied fabrics and bits and pieces. I would have loved to have done that, but
Hmm.
Michelle, I know Michelle for many years. It's a very hands-on thing in Northern Ireland, being where they were. They produced so much in-house. Again, the same thing I was saying with the Lord of the Rings, actual costumes. The cloth costumes. They have a huge making department. I don't know, Alex, Sebastian, any shows that you wish you'd done and we haven't? Cleopatra, the original.
Yes, I have that in one of my videos.
I mean,
Absolutely. I think that was the most expensive costume
Seven.
budget
Yeah.
ever. It was crazy, like so crazy. And her costumes were like, oh my God.
If I had one film I wish I had done, just because I still love it, the cinematography, is Once Upon a Time in America, Gabriella's film. I mean, those early childhood scenes are so beautiful, so spot on. The cinematography, the script is beautiful. Where the kids have got the Brooklyn Bridge and they just done a little had their suits fitted. That I would have loved to have done, but obviously that's a long time ago. That was such
Yeah.
a
And speaking of Lord of the Rings, so we were chatting about this earlier, like before we went on camera. Because this is another question I have: is there like anything like exciting that you're working on coming up? And that was one of them. So did you? I was pretty excited about the story you were telling me. Do you mind sharing that with everyone
Sorry,
about
which was this?
about working on the new Amazon Lord of the Rings, which is coming out in September?
Yeah,
I know you
it's
didn't make the costumes, but you had a good
we
part
did
in it.
we primarily we were supplying huge amounts of fabric, and this is Kate Hawley again from Crimson Peak. And as I said, New Zealand have these very, very large manufacturing areas, and everything's in house. So we did fabrics, but we also supplied jewelry and a large quantity of footwear. So that was exciting, and the footwear was beautiful. There were fabrics coming to us. A lot of fabrics came to us from all over the world.
Now,
But
actually, that's an interesting question because I noticed on your Instagram you do a lot. You must have like cobblers. Like, do you have like
yes,
footwear
yeah,
people who
we
you have a
don't
special department for that?
yes, we don't do it in house as on this building because there's you need a separate unit for the way it is to work. But yes, we
All the
do. We do
glues and
footwear.
everything, and
Yeah, we do headwear. I
yeah,
think
I was going to ask you, do you do men's hats, like
yes, we do.
millinery?
And women's hats. We do millinery as well. But
So the
again, that's
ones
a
in the
separate.
Underground Railroad, did you do those hats as well, or did you just do the suits?
No, we didn't.
Oh,
No,
okay.
but
I'm just wondering.
we did well. Last headwear we did for Al Pacino's thingy, didn't we? You put me on the spot now. I can't
Oh,
remember. But
the Al Pacino movie. Was that the one about? Was it about World War II?
yes, correct. We did a load of headwear for that.
Yes,
Emancipation, we did.
Emancipation. Hmm.
We did around that. Headwear for Roots?
Yeah, Dolores.
Yeah, for Roots as well. It's never a big part of what we do, but is as I said to you earlier on, a designer wants their life to be as easy as possible. They can have the costumes, the fabric, the jewelry, the footwear, the headwear from us. A one-stop shop, so to speak. Yeah, it makes their life easier. And so yeah, we do it as is what we do as we go along, but it's not the mainstay. The main part is the costumes and the fabrics, selling the fabrics.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Well, and it covers more of the body.
It certainly does.
And people look at that part more. It was funny. One of the things when I had Jeff Churchill on, he said that's one thing people don't tend to pay attention to is footwear. They don't tend to pay attention as much to it.
Jeff is very, very. He's at the top of the league of what he does. I think it's very difficult to find someone in his part of the world that is highly respected as Jeff. I mean, his footwear is amazing, and yeah, from a non-costume department point of view, it's overlooked because it's at the bottom somewhere.
And
But
oftentimes it gets cut off, right? Like they
Yes.
they cut it off unless there's a wide shot. So you don't oftentimes, or they're sitting or something, so you don't get to see it. So
But he does all the superheroes, so you see them dangling from a tree with their boots on.
yeah, and he is starting to do a lot of the superheroes. So he does get to finally see some of his footwear. I'm going to put you on the spot. I'm going to ask you. You don't have to answer if you don't want to, but do you have a favorite costume designer that you like to work with? And if so, will you tell me who it is? Are you allowed to tell me?
Ones that keep coming back.
Oh, I don't. Yeah, that makes good sense, right?
I mean,
Like Kate Hawley,
many-
obviously you've worked with her a few times.
Kate Hawley, again,
Ruth Carter.
Tim Chappell, Caroline. The list is. I mean, there's a long list of people, and if I start naming people too much, and then we'll never watch.
Of course, you don't want to
why
single
did-
anybody out.
I mean, as I said, I think the most important thing is I love working with people that are creative and have trust. And it's not necessarily has to be historical production. We do futuristic. It's just when you can be surprised when someone does something and you think, how's that going to work? I mean, we just did a big production for Houston Grand Opera. And it was tormenting. It was very large amount of costumes, needed very, very quickly, phenomenal amount of fabric. I mean, thousands of yards of fabric we had to purchase. And you were looking at the designs and looking at the fabric and think, how is this going to work? And then when it came together as an ensemble, this is Romeo and Juliet, Houston Grand Opera, I think we posted a few photographs of it. It looked absolutely fabulous. But at the time of seeing it, or the inception, or when you start it, you just think, this is ridiculous. And the whole workshop was just full of fabric. And it's very, very daunting. But when it was finished,
And fabric can take up a lot of space.
huge, because
Yeah.
you have to see what you're playing with. You can't just have it all bundled away, because if you're making a costume, this one fabric might be for 3 or 4 different pieces, and the thing is, when you're cutting fabric, especially when you're with small widths, it's very, very difficult to gauge, especially with women's costumes, how much you're going to need until you start. You can seriously underestimate. And the worst trimmings, especially, no one ever gets trimmings right. They always think, oh, you need a couple of yards of this. And in reality, the amount you need can be twice the amount.
It's got to go around a bunch of bends oftentimes, right?
You can do the tape measure, follow it around with a piece of string, and you still get it wrong.
Well, the other thing about needing extra fabric, you never know when they might call you and go, oh my gosh, we have, like, say in the case of sex education, they order 100, they call you back, they go, oh my God, we need 25 more or something, right?
It happens all the time. We always, a golden rule why we got so much fabric is that I tend to over order 25% on the estimate, and then the rest we keep in stock. But a lot of the time it's used.
And then you can sell it off, I guess, if you have to,
well, we do,
or use it up for smaller projects, or And that
always
goes back to you knowing how the business runs. Like you know this, like you say, when you first started out, you'd be like, oh, I'll order just what I think I need, and then you're like, oh my God, why did I not order more?
You can never have enough fabric.
You should put that on your business card. Okay, I'm gonna just do. I'm keeping you longer than I planned on, Daryl. Are you okay with that? I'm putting you on the spot here.
I mean, if you have to carry on, okay.
Okay, we'll just do a few more questions and then we'll wrap it up. Does that sound okay?
Yeah, sure.
Because I have to ask you this question. Do you have a favorite project? And it could be theater or film or TV or live event or something like that. Do you have one project you're like, this was the most amazing experience, like, of my life?
I know I'm going to waste 10 minutes thinking about it.
Like, for instance, years ago, I worked on the Special Olympics, and that to me was like the most amazing experience I'd ever had. We made something like 400 costumes for it. And to me, that was like an incredible experience. Did you ever have anything like that?
I mean, working with Ruth for the first time on Roots was really important, and because she was such a designer of such magnitude. And as I said again, I keep using this phrase, the trust she gave us was really, took me back a bit. And her enthusiasm and knowledge. I don't think I have a favorite because each time, I mean, Man in the High Castle again, and the subsequent amount of work that came from that again was an amazing opportunity.
I haven't seen that show, by the way, so I apologize, but my husband has and loved it. I've read the book, though. I've read the book.
The book is very different from the.
Mm-hmm. I've heard that, yes.
But which is commonplace anyway. I love. I mean, we just done we're doing a small theatre production for Jennifer. What's her name? Capria, and it's only a small production of that, but that's interesting. I try not to itemize these productions because each one has its own value and challenges and excitements. I mean, of course, some projects are just quite bland, and they have to be. That's neither here or there.
Do you ever see a show where you've provided the costumes and you see it on the screen and it just completely blows you away? It exceeds your expectations of how you thought it would look? Do you ever see something like that? I mean, obviously, I love that example of the Underground Railroad, the way she styled it.
I tell you, one of the things that misconceptions is that sometimes the most simplest of things are the most arduously difficult to make. And we did the Five Bloods.
The Five Bloods.
The Five Bloods for
Donna Berwick.
Thank you. And you can look at a GI uniform and think it's so simple, the tunic and the trousers. But I think for that tunic, there's something like 35 different pieces that go into making it. It's incredibly complex. And a similar number for the trousers, or as you call them, pants. That was interesting because though we made them before, we had we had originals to make from, and you put the budget to the costing department, and they accept it, and then they put it to the producers or the line producers, and they say, "What on earth are they charging this for? It's just a military uniform." but they're incredibly complex. You know, the number of pieces. A pair of trousers, it took 3 times as long to make these trousers as a normal pair of trousers. The tunic took 3 times as long almost as to make a normal jacket. So you know that's an interesting aspect of it.
I was going to say of all of your catalog of costumes, I haven't seen the movie, but I'm going to show you. This is my favorite.
Yes, that was interesting.
I love these costumes so much. And I don't, has this been out yet? Is it out?
Yeah. I think it's a local release in Austria.
In Austria, yes. So
and
it's about a
well,
ski team from like the 1970s, Olympic ski team. Is that what it is?
That chapter about this guy who prevented down skiing in the 70s. Yeah, I mean that was really interesting because what we had to make it from and a completely different form of manufacturing because you're stuffing it and that was interesting and doing the badges and getting the zips made and everything.
It looks so authentic. Like I looked at this picture. This picture looks like it's from the 70s.
Well, it's the haircuts and the sideburns.
The haircuts too, exactly.
And the guy with the plaid jumper on. I mean, that is
amazing. And the high-waisted pants.
It's the subtlety.
So is it the 76 Olympics?
Was it 76?
Because it says 76 on the sleeves. That's
yeah, 76.
And they're wearing like these deerstalker hats, which are so awesome. Yeah. I have to find this movie. I'm like, oh my God. I saw these pictures and I just absolutely love it.
If you have a chance, there's another one we did from the 70s for a Swedish director called
Hans Holm.
No, the one where we did the jacket with 36 pieces about the singer.
Yeah, Hans Holm. It's called Ted Show Me Love.
Ted Show Me Love.
Is that the one with? It's not this one, is it? It's not this one.
That's for an Icelandic.
That's Nikolai Coster-Waldau.
Yes.
Yeah.
That was Netflix recently.
All of the people watching love him because he's in Game of Thrones. But I love this jacket so much.
But Ted Show Me Love, the designer wanted a
it's called Ted Show Me Love. Ted Show Me Love.
Ted Show Me Love. I have to send you the picture afterwards because I haven't got it to hand. But she wanted a 1970s jacket made of pieces of fabric. So it's just like 1 inch square. So the actual what you see is mostly 2 inches by 2 inches squares of fabric made into a jacket. And it's one of those projects where you start, it can't be that difficult. And we did a competition on Facebook. It said, guess how many pieces of fabric it took to make this jacket. And it ran into some like 650 pieces, and people couldn't work out how it did.
Oh my God!
So you quilt everything. So you turn it into a 4-yard piece of fabric, 4x4, and the pieces of fabric you use, and you had to place them in such a way where the fabric next to it wasn't too different or worked out. But that was an interesting. We have a picture of it which I'll send to you afterwards, Heidi. But that was a very interesting.
I'd love to see it. I was going to say, sorry, where was I? Okay. Okay. I'm going to ask you this, and like, you don't have to say what it's about or anything, but what is, I'm going to ask you, what's your least favorite project you ever worked on? Like, what's the thing that like kept you up at night? Or maybe there's been a few.
Let me put it this way. Okay. I have a top 10.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Okay, and the number 1 spot's been there for 12 years.
Oh, do they know they're the winner?
No.
Do they know that they get the crown being the top in the number 1 spot for 12 years?
Discretion is the better part of valor, but I'll tell you very, very brief synopsis. It was working for the designer was absolutely amazing, very world famous, one of the top theatre designers in the world. And after this closes, I might tell you who it is. Okay. She was approached to do a show that was due to travel the world. It was a stadium show. I think it's actually more than 14 years ago now. And it was a colossal show. I mean, based on a film that had a menagerie of animals. I'm going to give you
I know. I know already.
Well,
no, maybe that would have been longer. That would have been, I
Well,
think,
the original
more
film
the.
was, yeah, they did a remake which didn't really work.
Yes. Okay.
Chariots, etc. And it was a colossal show, and the design was brilliant, and the supervisor I've known for decades. And there's a saying I have, people in film, sometimes in theatre, they have the aspirations of living in a castle, but can only afford a council flat. And this is one of those scenarios where they had the producer had an amazing idea, but just didn't have the expertise, and secondly didn't have the finances to do it, and it fell out. They would make a brilliant film about the actual making of this production because everyone fell out big time. The designer, I still get on very well with this guy.
It'd be like Terry Gilliam's Don Quixote or something like that.
Yeah,
Have
but
you
that
ever
was
seen that movie?
This became nasty.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
I mean,
Like people fell out. Were there divorces? Were there
well,
were there lawsuits?
yes, there was definitely lawsuits.
Oh
And
gosh.
then
Okay. Oh
there
dear.
was being quite far away. We rely on money to be transferred via wire transfer, and because they ran out of money, at one stage the producer said, "Look, this is going to be a huge showdown. If you do your costumes for us for free, I'll give you a percentage of the profits." And I thought, no, I'd rather have the money, I think, at this stage. So they were meant to be wiring transfer money to us. And so when you do a wire transfer, you have a slip of paper and you fax it through or email it through, say, look, we transferred the money and X number of dollars have gone into your account. So they were transferring the money at 10 o'clock in the morning in this particular country. And at 10:30, they were withdrawing the money again. So they had the transcript of the wire, but there was no money in the account. And 4 days or 5 days or a week later, say, well, where the money is? Oh, I don't know. I'm sure there's not a problem. So finally, I said, I'm not delivering your costumes until I get my final payment.
Mm-hmm.
And, I got threatened slightly on her, but I stood my ground.
Good for
it was
you.
very interesting. But that was
My brother-in-law worked for a very big theater company in Canada. The guy actually ended up going to jail later of this company. I'll tell you after too. And he never got paid. It was thousands, it wasn't hundreds of thousands, but it was in the thousands. And I knew lots of people who didn't. So this is another. We'll have to chat after to see if it's the same company.
I think the clues I've given are quite.
Yes.
Go with the competition. Win yourself first prize.
Yeah, exactly. Well, anyways, let me see if there's anything else I had. Okay, let's just finish off with this. Did you have any exciting, I know we talked about Lord of the Rings, any other exciting projects you have coming up that you're really jazzed about?
Well, what do we have? Okay. Oh yeah, Killers of the Flowering Moon's coming out mostly towards the end of the year, which is the Scorsese film he did for Apple with Jacqueline West. We did a lot of costumes.
Oh, Jacqueline West, who just did Dune.
Yeah,
fabulous designer.
She's doing the second installment of that, which we're supplying fabrics for.
Oh, for Dune?
For the second installment.
Oh, very exciting!
We went to half the book. And there's a TV series coming out at some stage as well.
Yes.
So Killers, Emancipation, the Perry Mason series, the second series I'm looking forward to. Obviously, Shogun.
Is Shogun going to be a limited series? Do you know? I don't know much about it. Okay, is it going to be what network is it on?
Fox, is it?
Which one?
Shogun.
FX.
FX, yeah, Fox.
FX, yeah.
Which was, I think, this is the original.
Yeah, and so you're dealing with like feudal Japan type of costume.
Yeah, it's been filmed in Vancouver, and I think there's some scenes might have been filmed in Japan, but. Yeah,
That's going to be really exciting. Richard Chamberlain, everybody, was in the original.
Dr. Kildare.
Exactly. Well, he was also in the Thornbirds. You remember that? That caused a lot of the ladies. That was very steamy, as they say.
Wow.
The only one in the chat who knows what we're talking about is probably Alicia. Nobody else will know what we're talking about.
I think anyone that's got interest in costume should go back and watch Shogun.
Oh, yeah. It was fantastic.
Look at the opening sequence where they're watching the galleon going across the water, the sea. If you look very carefully, you can see a helicopter shadow.
Oh, no way. Reflective
also-
Rambling. We're talking about Shogun. They're doing a remake of it, and it's James Clavell, I think, who wrote the book.
Yeah, James Clavell. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's his first big book that hit with Shogun, and
Yeah, and
obviously
then Taipan, I think, was the follow up.
Noble House.
It's excellent. It's sort of like it's a white. It's not a white savior, but it's like a sort of out of, I don't know, a fish out of
It was
water.
actually, that was actually filmed in Japan. I think it was filmed in Kyoto, most of it. as well,
Really?
which is surprising.
Yeah.
Uh, But look out for the Shogun for those of you who want to do a reminisce on the right
Yeah.
on the right hand side opening sequence.
Absolutely amazing. So, how many costumes for that are you making? Or did you make, I
we've
should
made
say?
this now. I think it wraps this week or next week or the next few weeks. Oh, hundreds, maybe thousands. I don't know, a lot. And footwear and supplied fabric again, and that was interesting as well. And
Oh,
that's
yeah.
the same design. I don't think we've ever worked for that designer before. Alex is called.
Carlos Rosario.
I'm sorry.
Shogun.
Yeah,
Carlos Rosario.
Carlos Rosario.
Carlos
was the designer.
Rosario. Okay.
Yeah.
I'll definitely I'll have to be watching that. I'm really excited about that. My mom will like love it. Like we watched all of Downton Abbey together. We watched all of what was the other show we were watching with? Upstairs Downstairs. We watched all the old Upstairs Down. I know you guys worked on the new Upstairs Downstairs, right?
Yeah, we did a couple.
But her and I have the box. I have the box set, like of that you have to watch on tape. Which I still have a player just in case.
Really?
Yeah. So
Be very
excellent.
careful with it.
What's that?
You have to be very careful with old VC.
I know
VC.
you can use a pen if they come unwound, right?
Yeah, you're not Betamax, though, are you?
No, no VHS.
VHS.
Hi Jesse. So anyways, well, I want to just thank Daryl. Oh my gosh, Daryl, this has been amazing. I really hope you come back. Like I would love to have you back again. Maybe we can like go through a couple of the movies that you've done and do some like movie review or something. Wouldn't that be fun? Would you be up to doing something like that? I'm putting you on the spot.
Let's wait till a couple of the ones we've talked about come out. And what I'll try and do, and I might have to hide things, but we can mostly try and do a walk around the workshop, and I can show you around. Perhaps
That would be amazing, like a shop tour.
Yeah.
You said you have one of those things that you wear on your head.
Well, I don't. But one of the boys does.
What do they call those things again? It's like there's a name for
GoPro.
it. A GoPro. Yes. Yeah.
But I think that gives a better insight. I mean, of who and what they are and what we do.
I have just had so much fun. This has just been such a blast for me, and I love hearing everything that you've been working on, all about your business. So I want to thank you so much for coming and taking the time, because you're just starting your day, or you're sort of in the middle of starting your day.
It's 4.5 hours into it. It's 10:30, and we started. At
Yeah,
6,
so I
and
was going to say Daryl's in Bangkok, so we're like you're 11 hours ahead of me. So it's just almost just after 11 for me.
And an invitation if anyone's ever in Bangkok and they want to pop in and see us, just let us know before. We're more than happy to show people around.
Oh, and I wanted to say I saw on your website that do you have people ever like approach you say, "Hey, I saw this show and you did the costume for it," like for instance the new Elvis movie.
Yeah.
Would you remake it? Like if someone asked you to do that, or do you try to not do that? Yeah.
I try. I try not to. The problem is that the expectations that the public have compared to it's just not cost effective. The thing is that people, when they see a costume, they think it costs this, and the cost of actually producing it is so expensive. And I'm not, don't want to be rude. It's beyond most people's budgets, and it's very difficult for us to put the time in to do something like that. I mean, we do have people contact us occasionally, and we would just give them costumes that we have in stock and say, buy me a bottle of port or something. And you can have it for the weekend. But we try not to actually do individuals. It doesn't really work to our cost. We found that it causes more problems for people. It's better just to stick to your industry, because the industry knows what we produce and how we produce it.
Yeah, I totally understand that. But anyway, I want to thank you so much. And so what I've done is I've put all of Siam Costumes links in the description. So if anyone's like watching this on the replay, for instance, all of the links are there. I would definitely recommend going to their Instagram page, because you've got you're posting constantly, and I follow you on Instagram. So that's But
Thank you.
I'll have to message Angelina and tell her thank you so much for
I
having
will.
me
I will
contacting.
drop her a line myself again.
Yeah,
Thank
she's lovely. But anyway, I want to thank everyone for joining the live stream. If the latest video I have out is the Marvelous Mrs. Maisel. Daryl, I don't know if you've seen that show, but it's so fun.
Yeah, I've watched a few of them. I mean, it's a very New York costume shop make, isn't it? It's
For
beautiful.
sure. Yeah, and everything is made in New York, so it is exactly what you say. So I have a video on that. Justin, who's my editor, he did a beautiful job putting all that together. So if you want to check it out, I'll put it in the description. And so anyway, thanks so much everyone for coming. Thanks everyone in the chat for coming. I hope I said hi to everybody. Said hi to Alicia. So take care everyone and have a great evening. Bye now.
Thank you very much, Heidi. Thank you. Very enjoyable.